You couldn't hear the roar of the Boeing 737's turbofan engines from the airport's observation deck, but you could see the big plane shudder slightly as 20,000 pounds of thrust came into play. The jet engine is a magnificent invention. It is as beautiful as any work of art, and has the deceptive simplicity of a flower, each fragile part of which depends intricately on the others. I have dedicated most of my life to my passion for these beautiful and powerful creations. This is my first great passion. The second is my wife, Karen, my two great loves, my wife and jet engines. It may seem strange to you that I hate airplanes and airports. This is partly due to the fact that the worst moments of my life happened in airports. When I left home for the first time to join the Navy, I said goodbye to my parents at the airport. I returned home through the same airport 4 years later, but to an empty house. My parents died while I was in the service. I'm an only child, and the word lonely doesn't even come close to describing how I felt at the time. But the worst moment was saying goodbye to my wife and children before going to war, knowing that they would be alone, without family support, and I would be half a world away fighting the Arabs. This was more than 20 years ago. Today, I dropped Karen off at the airport at 5:45 am on a rainy fall morning. Separating for 2 weeks turned out to be depressing. We've been married for 26 years. She went on a cross-country trip to visit our adult children. My wife had a particularly bad case of empty nest syndrome, or so I thought. I suppressed my feelings and sent her away with a smile and a request to return as soon as possible. We have two sons. The younger one left home at 18 to attend UCLA, and I've only seen him 4 times since then. Twice he came home, twice we went to California, but neither of these visits lasted more than 2 days. All 4 times our meetings were strangely awkward and tense. The eldest son was a little more domestic, even too much. He went to university, which was not far from our Victorian house, and, with the exception of the first semester of his first year, lived on the top floor of our 4-story house. He finished his master's degree without ever moving out of home, and only 6 months ago moved to Chicago, where he got a job. Don't get me wrong, I love my sons. When they were little, I enjoyed their company and loved them more than life itself. But now the children I loved so much have become grown men with whom I have nothing in common. I feel bored and uncomfortable in their company, and in my opinion, it is better for us to preserve memories of each other. With my wife, it's different. She has some kind of inner need for more than I can give her. After my eldest son moved to Chicago, Karen seemed calm for the first few months, but then, as if overnight, I returned home to find her in mourning. She was grieving, and there was nothing I could do about it. Working for the New York State Department of Health for 28 years, Karen has accumulated a large number of vacation days, which she earns annually. Since we didn't take any vacation this year, she decided to visit the kids, as she called our two tall, powerfully built sons. I couldn't take time off because of my research work at the university. My current government contract was delayed, and work became an excuse for me not to travel across the country to children who would prefer to limit themselves to brief phone conversations. I will miss Karen. As I already said, we have been together for 26 years more if you count the time of courtship. We met when I was discharged from the Navy after 4 years of service. I am a mechanical engineer specializing in jet engines. My Navy service was on an aircraft carrier, where I developed a reputation as a guy who could fix anything. It was almost talent, a sense of what was wrong with the engine. I seemed to have an amazing gift for seeing a problem before it happened and caused the plane to crash. 4 years of engine repairs were more than enough. Working in the Navy was grueling. An aircraft carrier can be a real pressure cauldron for those responsible for safety. Every time the plane took off, you prayed that it would return safe and sound, and more importantly, that you wouldn't miss anything. I met Karen one day at a health fair at the Empire State Plaza, known locally as the South Mall, about 2 weeks after I got back from the Navy. This is a huge complex. From the outside, from the street side, or, better yet, from the opposite bank of the river, it is an impressive set of monolithic structures. The most recognizable of them is the building in the shape of a flying saucer, which gives the mall a futuristic look. This plate is called Egg and is a theater complex. Inside the mall is a long, sterile corridor connecting the state capitol building, the state museum, and office buildings. The sterility is interrupted by the collection of contemporary art displayed in this public space. Some of the exhibits are protected due to attacks on them by unbalanced people in the past. After I visited the civil service office looking for a job, I wandered around the South Mall, since I had nothing else to do except serve in the Navy Reserve. I remained in the reserves for several years after active service. In the corridor of the mall, I came across several tables set up for medical examinations. Karen was working at one of these tables, conducting examinations. She was a nurse, but eventually became an administrator at the Department of Health. Then her employer got a new manager who paid great attention to issues of interaction with society. Her charming smile and the way she looked at her with her golden brown eyes made me agree to a blood pressure test, which I failed. I saw concern appear on her beautiful oval face as she brushed her reddish gold hair from her shoulders. Karen is what they call a strawberry blonde, that is, a redhead with a characteristic fiery temperament. However, her color leans more toward golden brown than red. Brown eyes combined with such hair were an unexpected, but stunningly beautiful combination. "What do you do for a living?" she asked. "Nothing at the moment, just discharged from the Navy," I answered. "Did they measure your blood pressure there?" she asked. "Yes, it was a little elevated, but no need to worry. I had a high-stress job," I said. "What did you do?" I explained, and then she said my blood pressure was 170 over 120, which was too high. I needed to have him checked again by my family doctor. Since I didn't have my own doctor, she offered to take the measurements herself the next day. My blood pressure was high, but within the normal range, and we continued to measure it throughout the week, getting high, low, and normal results. She made an appointment with Eva, where an experienced doctor explained that I needed to monitor my blood pressure and try stress reduction programs. This is not uncommon. For some time, your body will try to adapt to the absence of the incredible stress to which you were exposed. You can help this by learning to control your stress, he said. I followed his recommendation and returned to Karen, using the phrase that I needed her help to control my stress. I don't think she believed me, but she seemed to want to date me as much as I wanted to date her. Our first date was at an Italian restaurant nearby that Karen knew. It was a lovely little place with homemade food called Cetone. Sadly, it's long gone. Over dinner, Karen brought out her cheerful and outgoing nature, eager to learn all about me and what it was like to serve in the Navy. I seemed to talk for hours, which was uncharacteristic of me. She knew how to win people over. I wanted to talk to Karen. An aircraft carrier is the pinnacle of shipbuilding. It is essentially a floating city. The pilots are the princes of this city, but it is controlled by the chief petty officers and a small group of officers, I said. "Were you one of the officers?" she asked. "Not really. I was in charge of the planes. Once they realize you can do the job, they leave you alone. I think my problem was that I took it too personally. Too much responsibility can be hard," I said. "Your blood pressure clearly confirms this," she said. I laughed, although it wasn't particularly funny. People don't understand that we are losing as many crew members as pilots. This is a very dangerous environment full of fire, fuel, and explosives. Accidents happen. You just keep praying that it's not on your watch. "A lot of times you have no choice but to put someone at risk," I said, and she must have noticed that I was getting gloomy. "Well, visiting all these exotic places must have been fun. Did you have a girl in every port?" she said. Now I actually laughed. "No, I'm afraid I'm unlucky with women," I answered. "Well, now you're teasing me. A handsome man like you must look stunning in uniform," she said. "But I'm really unlucky. As we pulled into port in Manila, my vacation was canceled due to a radar upgrade for the F-14A. Back in Thailand, I was in a bar with a beautiful girl, and the place was closed by a police raid. But the worst thing was in Sydney. I dated a girl for 6 months and thought it was serious. But one day in a club, a man came up to her, kissed her, and told me to treat his lady well. When I asked her who it was, she said, 'This is my husband.' You must be joking. I was shocked. No, this is my husband. We have an agreement. He doesn't mind if I date others, she said. So, like I said, I have no luck with women, I concluded. Then Karen took my hand and looked at me with her deep brown eyes. After a moment, she said, "Perhaps your luck has changed, sailor, but not today. I am 24 years old and still innocent. I need to get to know you better." "That's even better," I replied. "Me too, so maybe I'm really lucky." 3 months later, I was working at the university and was married to the most wonderful woman in the world. Both of us had no sexual experience, but we resolved this issue before marriage. I think they both wanted to make sure there weren't any problems. We didn't have a big wedding because we didn't have a family. Each of us had distant relatives somewhere in distant places, but apart from a few friends, there was no one to invite to the wedding. Karen offered me a deal. "I don't want a big wedding, but a house would be nice," she said. We didn't wait long, and after 9 months, we started trying to have a baby. And at this time, they were looking for a home. We found a house that Karen thought was ideal in one of the old industrial towns on the east bank of the river. It was a huge, dilapidated townhouse. It was located at the foot of the hill on which stood the university where I worked and where our firstborn son later studied. The area was far from ideal, the forgotten center of a dying industrial city. The Victorian houses here had been broken up into tiny apartments for students and the elderly, and the riverbank was lost behind a row of abandoned factories. The house was a 4-story brick building with a so-called English basement, a floor that is partly underground and partly above it. The first floor was reached by short steps called a porch, and a separate entrance to the basement was located under this porch. Presumably, it was because of the need to bend down when entering through this lower doorway that the word stoop appeared. The house was built in the mid-19th century. It retained Victorian charm with an abundance of decorative elements, but at the same time, it had all the problems inherent in buildings of that time. At the time of the move, Karen was pregnant. "I am the happiest woman in the world," she said, and I believed her. 25 years later, on a Wednesday morning, I drove Karen to the airport, not even knowing how my life would change. More precisely, how she had already changed, but I didn't notice it. She called me that evening and every day after that. Saturday started out clear and sunny. I decided to start working in the garden. I was just going down to the basement to replace the light leaf rake with a heavy iron one when I heard the doorbell ring. If I was still in the yard, I wouldn't have heard him. If it hadn't been raining on Friday and I'd gone to see the new Ben Affleck movie, I wouldn't have answered the door. Friday's rain made the leaves too heavy for light rakes, but Saturday was clear and dry. Such are the vagaries of the weather and the vicissitudes of fate. It was this accident that destroyed the myth of my happy marriage: rain one day, no rain the next. I crossed our small lobby, opened the outer door, and saw a small Asian girl standing in the doorway. She seemed even smaller than she really was. Her petite figure was clad in black leather high-heeled boots. Her entire outfit was in dark colors, from an elegant black suit to a silk gray blouse peeking out from under her coat. I thought she was dressed a little younger than her age, which I estimated to be about 52, the same as mine. But she looked great. She was one of those women who retain rare beauty into old age, and she knew about it. Something about her reminded me of Karen. Outwardly, they were completely different, but their manner of holding themselves and looking at their interlocutor were very similar. "How can I help?" I asked. "I'm looking for Karen," she replied, slightly moving a large rectangular package wrapped in brown paper. She held it with her right hand, resting it on the metal railing of our porch. "Sorry, she's not at home right now. Would you like to come in and leave a message?" I asked. "Oh, what a pity that I didn't find her. I am Avril Dumonte. I stopped by on my way to New York to bring her a painting," she said, pointing to a package that really resembled a work of art in shape. "You must be her husband, Robert. Could you please help me? It got a little heavy on the way from the car to your door," she said, crossing the threshold and at the same time trying to lift the package. I took the painting from her hands and followed her into the house. She seemed to know the layout as she walked confidently into the large front living room. The way she said her name, as if I should know it, confused me, as did her obvious knowledge of me and our house. I had never met anyone with the last name Dumont before or heard anyone mention it. Avril spoke English with a slight but distinct French accent. Her manner of speech matched her name, and I began to reconsider my first impression of her ethnicity. Perhaps she was not entirely Asian. I sat Avril down on the old-fashioned sofa we'd inherited from Karen's mother and offered her something to drink. She asked for tea. "Formosa by how, if you have any left." "I'm afraid Karen got me hooked on it," she said, naming the expensive tea my wife loved and kept for guests and special occasions. "No problem," I said, completely confused as to how this woman knew my wife so well. With a teapot for the guest, I sat opposite her in a large leather chair with wings, holding my mug of coffee in my hands. I could not appreciate the taste of expensive Formosa tea. "Excuse my appearance, I was gardening," I said. "There's nothing to apologize for. You're just as brutally charming as Karen described. If there's one thing I'm guilty of, it's that I arrived without warning. This morning I decided to stop by because I remembered her portrait. I'm heading to New York to discuss Philip's retrospective at the Museum of Modern Art." I left her an email, but maybe she didn't get it, she said between sips of tea, as if I should know who Philippe was. "She couldn't be here for you. She's in California, I guess. Or just arriving, since it's early afternoon here, and it's still morning there." "She's visiting our son, Oscar," I said. "Oh, I should have called earlier. I really wanted to see her hang it. I think this is one of Philip's best works. Definitely the most delicately done, although a little out of his usual style," she said. I was about to ask her who Philip was and who she was, but she beat me to it, opening the picture that stood next to her on the sofa. The brown wrapping paper fell with a rustling sound reminiscent of the Christmases and birthdays we celebrated in this very room. But the sound had to be a loud scream. The picture pushed me back against the wings of the chair, like a man who sees life disappearing from under him. The painting showed a woman in the simple act of bending over to pick up her panties from an elegant embroidered chair. There was a hint of her dressing table at the edge of the painting. Her golden red hair fluttered as if from movement. Those gorgeous golden brown eyes looked straight out of the painting. The woman was naked, and the light was coming from a window facing due east at the back of our house, in the bedroom we had shared for the past 25 years. We bought this house with the last of my war savings and a loan from her state pension. It was an old, run-down house in a dying part of town that has since experienced a remarkable renaissance. Our dream home was a dilapidated building in need of renovation. One of the first things we did was wallpaper the bedrooms. We bought green and gold striped wallpaper for 30 cents a roll at a discount store in the old industrial town of Cohoes. Later, the painting was clearly painted after the birth of our second son. Karen still had a slight swelling in her lower abdomen, which persisted for several years after Oscar was born. She eventually got rid of that little belly bump through yoga and running, but I missed it. This swelling, it seemed to me, hinted at her strong sexual desire. It increased her attractiveness, although she never believed it. The artist did not miss this, nor did he miss the slight hint of the defiant smile that was always on her face. A smile that seems to say, "Come here, let's see what you can do." He was good, maybe even great, I didn't know. He depicted my wife in the early morning, with the sun shining through our bedroom window against the backdrop of an unmade double bed. She bent down to pick up the pink lace panties from Grandma's chair, an action I had seen thousands of times in this very room. When Avril turned from the picture to me, her face shone with a proud smile, which quickly disappeared. My expression probably said it all. There was no doubt that the painting depicted my wife, naked, and it was painted about 20 years ago. How or why I could not understand, but any explanation had to include events that I would not expect from a faithful wife. I couldn't believe it. "Oh, Sherry, I thought you knew." After all, they lived together. They were lovers for many years. "My God, how could you not know?" she said, frowning worriedly. "There must be some mistake," I said, clutching at straws. My wife has lived with me continuously for the last 26 years. This is our bedroom with wallpaper that we glued together. This is our bed that we still sleep in together, I said. I guess it's time, she began to get up. No, sit, I said. You can't tell me something like that and just walk away. Who are you? How do you know my wife and me? And for God's sake, who is Philip? Avril said her husband, Philippe Dumonte, was an artist and world-renowned restorer. In 1989, he was hired to restore 6 paintings damaged on the South Pier. I remembered the time when a man who believed himself to be the reincarnation of Michelangelo decided to fix the paintings. After an extensive search, the Government General Services Authority hired a Canadian firm to carry out the restoration. Then a debate arose about attracting specialists from another state, but the experts insisted. They wanted only the best. Apparently, Philip Dumonte was just such a person. Soon after Philip's arrival, an affair began. He met Karen on the South Pier while working in the museum building. She worked in the tower. They were practically in sight of each other. Avril and Philip had an open marriage at her insistence. We were young and didn't want to miss out on anything, but we were mature enough to understand each other's needs, she said. She was glad that Philip found someone while he was away from home. He was torn between Montreal and Albany, but spent most of his time days and nights here for 3 years. And then came the period, starting in the summer of 1990, when he moved into my house and stayed there. Avril came several times. She knew I was away but still married to Karen. The reason for this was never explained to her. She assumed that I knew about their relationship and approved of it. I just thought. She spoke about you with love, praising you as a husband and father. I realized that Philip moved because you couldn't be with her, and little boys needed a male example, and a lonely woman needed support. Philip and I had 2 teenage daughters who studied at a boarding school. Philippe was with us for the holidays, and for Christmas 1990 Karen came to our house in Mont Royal. My daughters loved her and your boys as much as I did. How could you not know? Whatever doubts I still had, her words dispelled them completely. 1990 was truly unusual. Then the monster attacked its oil neighbor, plunging my country and others into war. I foolishly remained in the Naval Reserve, although inactive. I left the Navy as a first lieutenant and was promoted to full commander in the reserves due to the work I did in the reserves and on government contracts. In August, my skills became in demand, and I was surprised that I was not called up earlier, before Saddam's troops crossed the border into Kuwait. The telegram arrived on August 6th. 2 days later, I was on board the U.S. Eisenhower. The next 10 months of my life were like a nightmare unfolding over the Persian Gulf, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and Iraq. The only thing that kept me going was the belief that I had a loving wife and 2 incredible boys waiting for me at home. They were all mine, and I returned to them. When the engine of our Grumman F-14 Tomcat failed during the flight, I knew that I would survive because Karen was waiting for me at home. This happened while I was flying from the U.S. Eisenhower to Saudi Arabia. It was January 16, 1991, the day before the start of hostilities. I wasn't worried. The pilot and I followed standard engine restart procedures. Each attempt failed until only the last one remained at random. It shouldn't have worked. The instructions said it couldn't, but it worked. I've seen people die half a dozen times, sometimes so close. Cables snapped, planes crashed, and more people died on my technical missions than pilots. This is war. Collateral losses are always the most numerous and least noticed. Accidents occurred when people, under enormous pressure, tried to accomplish something that was practically impossible. We've launched heavier than air machines into the sky and brought them back to the deck, most often safely. But it doesn't matter. Karen and the boys were waiting for me at home safe. They spent part of Christmas 1990 in Montreal. Why I still didn't know. I remember Kevin talking excitedly about visiting a strange city and about 2 girls, Simone and Susan, sisters. Over a poor telephone connection on the other side of the world, a 5-year-old child could not really explain anything. I told Karen I loved her every chance I got, but it wasn't often. And obviously not enough, although their romance had already lasted about a year by that time. She loves you with all her heart and soul, Avril said. Philip was her second man, her petite passion, her more mature, experienced lover. She didn't have much experience. They were, as they say, in love with love itself. As much friends as lovers, she said, looking at me as if that explanation was supposed to mean something. When Philip died 3 months ago from a stroke, she came to his funeral. I asked about you, and she said you were fine. She said that the last of the boys moved out, and you and she are happy and still in love. I was happy for her, despite my sadness. I brought this painting because Philip asked that it belonged to her. I should have realized this and given it away then. She's great, isn't she? She said, looking at me for confirmation. I stood up and walked over to the painting, looking straight at the proof of my wife's complete betrayal. It's very beautiful. He captured it better than any photograph. He captured it exactly. A beautiful woman of easy virtue, I said. Avril gasped. No, no, you have to understand. Their relationship was something beautiful, an innocent love. Please understand, she begged. I could only shake my head. She spent another half-hour trying to convince me of something without knowing what. She didn't dare leave the painting, afraid that I would destroy it. She is very valuable. Please promise that you will deliver it to Karen safely, she said. Why not? I won't move her. She doesn't mean anything to me anymore. Avril left, still explaining something and crying quietly. Please talk to Karen. Don't do anything stupid. Don't let it bother you, she said as the door closed behind her, and with her my old life closed. Karen, my morning flight from Chicago arrived in Los Angeles right on schedule, a little after noon. Los Angeles is my least favorite city. At least, I am a typical New Yorker, although I was born and raised in West Pittston, Pennsylvania. My husband, Rob, is a true New Yorker. A former naval officer, I think he would have withered and died in this desert climate. My son Oscar and his friend Mark meet me at the airport, as if I shouldn't know that he's gay and that he and Mark are a couple. 22 years ago, I gave birth to a 12-pound angel. Now he is a tall, lean young man, 6 feet 3 inches tall, who hugs me tighter than a bear. He doesn't get along with his father, and I can't understand why. Rob loves his son, but a chasm grows between them. Men often remain a mystery. What can a woman do? Rob doesn't even realize that his son is gay. My rib is what other men call a man-man. He is big, not only tall, but imposing, which hides his sensitive nature. It hurts my husband that my son is moving away. He would never have guessed the truth about Oscar's sexuality. I'm sure there's no engine problem that Rob can't solve with a few minutes of inspection, but relationship problems fly under the radar, as if they don't exist unless he has a trained guide dog nearby. He is helpless with people, except when it comes to men under pressure. Then he becomes an inspiration that is followed like sheep to the slaughter. I shouldn't know about this, but I do. In the evening, we go to a restaurant and dance club with a Mexican twist. The visitors are a mixed crowd, mostly Anglo-Saxons and Asians. There are quite a few obviously same-sex couples here, both male and female. I attract a lot of looks from both men and women. At 50, I'm still attractive. My son and his friend think I'm ancient, but I'm wearing a short skirt and a low-cut blouse, and I'm going to dance and have fun. I'm married, but I'm not dead. It's nice to be 50 and attract younger men. I'm not a walking woman. I've only had 2 men in my life, and I loved both of them deeply. Robert MacDonald, my Rob, was my first love and will remain my last. Philippe Dumontet was the second, and his recent death has weighed heavily on me. We were not true lovers for a long time, but we were connected by a deep relationship, full of love, friendship, and my immense gratitude. Philip was there when I needed it, but my husband was not. An aggressive man, whom I think is about 30, asks me to dance. He's shorter than me in my low shoes, but he makes up for it with energy. He is the first of many men I dance with. I keep track of time. I want to call Rob. I'm guessing he went to see Argo with Benefolk and will likely get home just after midnight this time. At 9:30 Pacific time, I apologize to my current dance partner and find a quiet spot near the ladies' room to make a call. My phone was turned off. I turned it off when I got on the plane in the morning. I'm getting old and forgetful. I didn't turn it back on. I had one missed call from Avril Dumonte, probably reminding me that the Philippe retrospective was still in the planning stages, so I agreed to help. I call Rob, but the call goes straight to voicemail. I think he's still at the cinema, or like me, he forgot to turn on his phone. I call my home number and hear an answering machine. Rob, I arrived safely. Call me when you receive this message. After 2 hours, I'm tired of dancing, and I'm starting to wonder why my husband isn't calling back. We return to Oscar and Mark's condominium, where I drift off into a jet-lagged sleep. I wake up too early and call Rob again. Again, only voicemail. I'm calling my home phone. Rob, you probably forgot to turn on your mobile phone. Call me. At 8 in the morning, a sleepy Mark joins me in the kitchen and offers to cook breakfast. I agree if he allows me to help. But Rob is still not in touch, and now I'm starting to worry, wondering who to call. I remember the call from Avril yesterday, and a chill runs down my spine. No, it's been too long. I met Philippe Dumontet in the old canteen on the South Pier. This was not a gourmet place if you liked food. I had a thermos with strong dark tea. I don't drink coffee. I had a cheap romance novel and a 45-minute lunch break. I could read at my desk, but sometimes you just need to get out of the office. I read this flimsy novel in the hope of regaining my sex drive. 4.5 years after the wedding, it completely disappeared. When I first married Rob, I couldn't get enough of him. But after the birth of my second son, everything disappeared. I've been dead from the waist down for the last year. Why doesn't anyone say this could happen? I still loved my husband deeply. He was the man you dreamed of marrying as a little girl. He was my prince. He has jet black hair and blue eyes. He looked like he came out of a fairy tale, but he was incredibly shy and quiet. He rose to heights when there was a crisis, but I knew that he was a very sensitive person. I watched him as he read to our children. I saw him gently kiss the top of their heads as they slept. He was a man of action and courage, but with a kind, gentle soul. He is the man I would like to have by my side for all eternity. But I no longer wanted him physically. At first, I thought it would go away on its own. But the more time passed, the more afraid I became of sex. I became more and more desperate. Sometimes I had to pretend to avoid making excuses, and I was afraid that my husband would sooner or later figure it out. What kind of woman am I if this happens to me? Please forgive me. I hate eating alone, and watching you over the past few days, I noticed that you are always alone too. I'm sure this terrible book can't be that interesting, said the tall, elegant man with a distinct French accent in his perfect English. I found out that his name is Philippe Dumonte. He is an artist by vocation and a restorer by profession. He was a little taller than my husband and thinner, what they call lanky. He had an unruly head of black hair with hints of gray, befitting a man of 42. This made him more than 12 years older than me. However, there was a sense of youth and joy in him that sparkled in his sparkling blue eyes. His angular face was beautiful in that very Gallic style. I wouldn't eat this if you value food, I said as he set down his standard cafeteria tray of chicken with some thin sauce and powdered puree. I've learned within 2 weeks that food is a lost art form in your old man. Why? He said, skillfully imitating a northern New York accent so similar to a western New England accent. You are too strict. There is good food here, you just need to know where to look, I replied. Perhaps you will become my guide? Maybe we can have dinner together sometime, he asked. Sorry, but this is impossible. I'm married, I said, showing my engagement ring and diamond ring. But let me do something with your tea, I added, replacing the tea bags from the cafeteria with the tea brewed from my thermos. Oh, this is good tea. You are beautiful and generous. You could spare an evening to feed a hungry person, he said. In the end, I agreed. It was almost impossible to resist his charm and sophistication. Arranging for late work turned out to be easy. We had dinner, and I returned home at 9 o'clock in the evening, feeling more alive than ever. I wanted intimacy. The first person to feel it was Rob in our bed, but in my thoughts I was with the French artist who excited my feelings. 3 weeks later, Philip persuaded me to stay with him. It was not a house, but a workshop in the museum building. There were no long nights. I changed my schedule at work so we could meet in the morning or afternoon. Sometimes we saw each other at the beginning of the evening. He was sensitive to my situation. His wife Avril had a friend whom he called a fan. Philip said Thomas was younger, which he said compensated for the fact that she was married at a young age with children. When I first lay in his studio, curled up in his arms, I felt no guilt. I knew the guilt would come later, but at that moment I felt peace. He understood my lack of desire and seemed to sense it. You will feel the desire for your husband again. Relax and enjoy the sex, the thrill of a new man, but remember that your husband has the first place in your heart and the right to take back your body when you are ready, he said. Sex was quite traditional, but he knew how to awaken a woman's desire, ignite her imagination. It all starts in the head. It excites the mind, but it needs a little help, he said. Neither Rob nor I had much experience. We tried different things, but we lacked technique. Philip taught me this. Who taught you all this? Avril? I asked. No, I taught her the same way I teach you. My mother arranged for me to study, he replied. He told me the story of young Philippe and Colette. She was older, the same age as his mother and her friend. Colette was, as he said, a companion, a kept woman. She moved from one man to another, being a wealthy woman. She was not a woman of easy virtue, he said. I never called her that, I replied. No, but that's what you thought my American housewife. You need to understand us, he continued. My parents emigrated from England immediately after the war. The Germans forced them to flee France to England. My mother was a prominent communist before the war. It was easier in Canada than in England, but still not easy. Dad was a museum curator and art historian. Of course, he was an amateur artist. In Canada, my mother worked as a secretary. Colette was a friend from France. Mom believed that sex was a natural phenomenon, but that it should be taken seriously. Colette was chosen to be my teacher. She had enough experience for this task. Once a week for a year, I studied with her, as required by the course. He finished with a laugh. And now will you teach me? I asked. But of course, I have to do this in memory of Colette, he replied with another one of those little smiles that I was starting to like. My biggest challenge was the desire and need to share new skills and knowledge with my husband. I couldn't just sit down with Rob and say, honey, I met a great French lover and he taught me everything we did wrong and a lot of things we should try. But you know, I'm resourceful. What is this? Rob asked, climbing into bed. A book, I answered. Yes, but the title is The Art of Enjoying Love. Is there something you want to tell me? Well, since you asked. After Oscar was born, I wasn't a good enough lover, and I decided I had to do something. I think we need to add some variety to our lives. Let me show you, I said. Night after night, weekend after weekend, we tried everything. Everything Philip taught me, I passed on to my husband. There were a lot of books before we finished. I think Rob didn't read any of them, and I was just looking through them to put together the program. But the sex got really hot. Philip was right. I again felt desire for my husband, even if only because I am human. Having two hot men in my life at once drove me crazy with passion. However, all good things come to an end sooner or later. Our affair with Philip lasted about a year. We both knew it would inevitably end. Philip and I discussed this. I knew that he was starting to become too attached to me, and I was afraid that even my very naive husband would eventually figure out everything. The disaster occurred on August 6, 1990. Everything had been brewing for several days, but it was on this day that the war began. This was not our war, but that no longer mattered. Many would be called up soon, but one of the first was my husband, a jet propulsion expert still in the Navy Reserve. The telegram arrived on August 7th, and the next 2 days became hell on earth. I was supposed to be cheerful, but my husband was leaving, and I couldn't do anything about it. A more naive woman might have reassured herself that her husband would be in the rear, but I knew the danger he would be in. What made it worse was that I saw the incredible stress taking its toll on him after his first discharge from the Navy. Rob was older and in excellent physical shape, but this would not have saved him from a stroke. "Do you have the blood pressure monitor I gave you?" I asked. "Yes," he replied. "Promise you'll use it." "Every day, twice, as you said, and I will be treated if the pressure rises," he said. "Okay, kiss your sons and me goodbye," I said. We were at the airport. Rob was already in shape. People watched. Did they know that I was saying goodbye to my husband, perhaps forever? Did they understand what this meant? That I am an only child, married to an only child, and our parents are already dead. Have they seen the two little boys I will now have to raise alone? I wanted to scream. I have a big old house that we bought so stupidly, it requires constant investment. Who will repair it? Who will pay for additional child care? Who will read to my boys at night? I don't know how I got home after the airport. I started crying before I even got the boys into the car. "Why are you crying?" Kevin asked. "I miss Daddy already," I replied. "Don't cry, please." "Okay," I said, wiping my eyes. "That's it, I'm not crying anymore." But inside I was terrified and angry. I was angry at the government, at my husband, because I knew that secretly he loved going to war. They had not yet begun hostilities, but planes were already constantly taking off and landing. The war began even before the first shell was dropped. People have already started dying. I parked my old Volvo in front of the house and saw him sitting on the porch with a suitcase at his feet. "Philip, what are you doing here?" I asked. "Did you think I would leave you when you needed it?" he answered. From that moment on, Philippe Dumonte, a restorer and artist, became, if anyone asks, my tenant. I had no close relatives or friends who could know the truth. We lived in a temporary area in the city center where we knew our neighbors superficially and only briefly. Philip moved in with me and in my bed. He took upon himself all the hardships that I struggled with. He became my support in a cruel world. He continued to visit Avril on weekends. Now she came to us. On such nights he slept with her, but during the day we could make love. Avril and I became friends, which is still the strangest relationship of my life. For Christmas 1990, I went to Montreal with the boys. It was both the best and worst Christmas of my life. It was the worst Christmas because Rob was in the Gulf, and I barely heard from him, just one short call on Christmas Day. It was the best Christmas because I felt like I was part of the family. I had a role, a place. The extended Dumonte family hosted large gatherings, sometimes as many as 40 people, including relatives of Philippe and Avril. I quickly realized that I already had a certain role in their family. I was Philip's companion. In my naivety, I expected that I would be perceived as a stranger or simply tolerated, but I was wrong. They accepted me as a member of the family. They understood that if I could not be with my husband, then, of course, I would be with Philip. This is, after all, my place. That Christmas, Philip made one mistake. He decided that he needed to have a painting of me in his house in Montreal to remember me. He began planning this picture, making sketches. It was supposed to be a picture of me in the morning, naked, just getting out of bed. Philip had an amazing memory for detail. When we returned home, he began work on the painting. I posed for him. It was a labor of love. He finished it in March, 3 months before Rob returned. Philip left 2 days before Rob returned home. My affair with Philip continued for another year. Rob returned broken. He was not the same, and I still relied on Philip. At this time, Avril broke up with Thomas. She needed Philip, and he began to spend more time in Montreal. When his restoration work was completed, we both knew our relationship was over. Over the next 12 years, we remained close friends, almost like family. We called each other regularly. Once a month, I arranged trips so that we could meet. When the stroke took my Philip, I was heartbroken. After the funeral, we gathered at the house on Mount Royal. There was Avril, me, and 3 other women. We were all his women. 5 of us were mourning. Avril said that the others meant much less to him than I did. You were his special love, she said. I know that you are grieving as much as I am. Such love is rare. She was determined to ensure that his work received the recognition it deserved. She wanted me to take part in this. You were such an important part of his life. It would be right for you to be involved, she said. I promised to do everything I could. With a heavy heart, I called Avril. My dear, I'm afraid I've ruined your marriage, she said when she answered. What's happened? I asked, and immediately began to sob, unable to stop. We both cried. I thought he knew, she said. No, I never found a way to tell him. He saw the picture. Oh, Lord. Mark, who was preparing some complex dish stuffed French toast, stopped and came up to me. Did someone die? He asked. No, just my marriage, I replied. Avril told us what she knew, and then Oscar joined us. He was shocked, and I think Mark was too. Mom, what do you think Dad will do? Asked Oscar. I don't know, but I need to talk to him, and he's not answering my calls, I said. We decided to call Kevin. He tried to call and called us back. No luck, he doesn't answer. You know, he probably blames me for never telling him about Philip, Kevin said. He was right. I instilled in my 6-year-old son that he should never mention Philippe or the Dumont's family. My little boy covered for me. Now he was paying for his childhood devotion to his mother. Oscar tried to call next, but his father was already too distant. Rob cut himself off completely from his family, and it was entirely my fault. We spent the rest of the day looking for plane tickets so I could return home. I managed to find a flight for Monday night and arrived Tuesday morning. At 9 a.m. on Tuesday, I arrived home a week earlier than planned. Rob wasn't home. I assumed he was at work. As soon as I entered the living room, I saw this. On my mother's sofas from the living room, there was a painting that Philip painted. No one could look at this picture and not realize that Philippe Dumonti was my lover. I fell to my knees and started crying. Why did this happen now? I decided that there was only one chance left for me, to tell Rob the whole truth and pray that he could get through it. I wasn't ashamed of what I did and didn't regret it. I just hated that Rob now knew and was suffering so much. It was simply unfair. None of us did anything wrong. Why should we suffer? I decided the best thing to do was to make Rob a nice dinner and try to talk. I need to explain the inexplicable. I chose mac and cheese. I have a special recipe that I created just for Rob because it's his favorite dish. I reduced the fat and salt content by replacing some of the cheese and milk with chicken broth and tomatoes. It wasn't healthy food, but it was better than the classic version. I cooked it rarely as a treat. I put all my energy into cooking. Then I chose an outfit that would look attractive but not too revealing. I wanted to appear desirable without making anyone think I was available. I needed Rob to understand that Philip was the only other man in my life, and our affair was not a dirty affair. I was and remain a good woman and wife. By 6:30, I was sitting in the living room. I hid the painting in the back closet, carefully wrapping it in an old blanket. Dinner was ready. 2 bottles of white wine were chilling in the refrigerator. I wore a pink tea party dress that showed off my hair. I was as ready as possible. I heard Rob come up the back stairs, but he did not enter the house. Instead, he headed straight to the 4th floor. I waited for him to come down, but he never came out. My plan to meet him in the living room failed. I walked up the front stairs to the 4th floor. On a small platform at the top, there was a door with a rather impressive lock. I knocked. "Rob, I'm home," I said. There was no answer, but I heard movement inside. "Please, Rob, I made dinner mac and cheese. We can eat and talk." "Please, Rob, let me at least try to explain," I say into the silence outside the door. "I'll wait downstairs," I say before leaving. He doesn't come down that night. He lives on the 4th floor. The rest of the house belongs to me. We don't talk or communicate in any way. Every evening I go upstairs and invite him to dinner. This continues for 2 weeks. Avril calls me every day and expresses her condolences to me. "Have you talked yet?" she asks. "No, I'm being silently ignored." Oh God, why doesn't he understand? If only Philip were here. I can hear in her voice how lonely and lost she feels. We are talking about an exhibition. She has problems with the museum bureaucracy. Almost 600 works could potentially be included in the exhibition, but they are held by different owners, and acquiring them for exhibition requires more effort than the museum is willing to put in. She needs help, but she insists that I talk to Rob first. On Friday of the third week, I can't stand it anymore. Knocking firmly on the door of the apartment on the fourth floor, I say, "Robert MacDonald, this is your wife, the woman you have been married to for 25 years. I am the mother of your two sons and the person who loves you more than his own life. I have always loved you and always will. But I have a love story I have to tell you, and it concerns me and one other person. After everything we've meant to each other over the years, you owe it to me to listen to me. I'll be downstairs with dinner. You can eat and then hear my story," I say through the tight, closed door. He comes down in about an hour for dinner. I have expensive steaks and a good bottle of Cabernet. We eat, and then I start talking. I speak to him from the bottom of my heart. I don't lie and I don't hide anything. There's no point in hiding the truth from Rob anymore. I met a wonderful man who was there for me when I needed him. First, he helped me intimately when I was in a terrible situation, and then he took care of me and my children when I was alone. Something was wrong. You could feel it in the sound of the engines. The F-14 Tomcat was sluggish. Its characteristics were clearly violated. The pilot didn't seem to notice, but I knew. Before dawn, we were thrown off the deck of the aircraft carrier US Eisenhower. We were heading to Riyadh for the final meeting. Everything was in a hurry, as always. We were going to war. All preparations were completed. I had to review the final details and come back to see the first planes take off. There was one day left before the war. When the sun rose, we were traveling at supersonic speeds at an altitude of over 20,000 feet. The engines stopped. The plane continued to move by inertia, but not for long. 43,000 pounds of metal can't fly for long. Then he starts to fall. He doesn't plan, he doesn't maneuver, he just falls. The pilot attempted to restart the engines. Nothing. Again, nothing. We began to rapidly fall towards the dark sea. "Time to eject, sir?" he asked with an attempt to maintain equanimity, but his voice treacherously betrayed the worst fear of every pilot. "Restart," I said. Nothing. We fell faster and faster towards the dark water. "Turn off the fuel and try again," I said. "This is crazy. Do it now." I woke up screaming when we hit the water. This was not the first time I had this dream, but this was the first time I woke up alone in bed. Always before, Karen was by my side. Unlike the dream, in real life, the engines started working. The problem was fuel. It was contaminated, one of those mistakes that happen on the way to war. Ultimately, it was my fault as commander, but we were lucky. I noticed the problem, almost losing my life. The backup was not infected. The engines restarted on the reserve tank when the main supply was cut off. We immediately returned and checked all the fuel. My flight to Riyadh in the afternoon was at Mach 2 speed. I wouldn't be able to eject and come back to fix the problem. I can only imagine how many planes we could have lost, but the engines seemed to whisper to me, and I realized the problem in time. Why do I still hit the water in this dream? Because I lost Karen. This realization hit me harder than death. There was a knock on the door from behind. There was a small porch off the back stairs. Someone is there. I opened the door and Avril Dumont strode in her stiletto heels. She came for a week after Karen, and I talked about Philip. We talked about what they did. For some reason, Karen expected me to shrug and forget, but I couldn't and went to the fourth floor. "Mon Dieu, what a cry," Avril said. "Sorry to disturb you, but what are you doing up here?" I asked. I was sitting on the top balcony admiring the view of the university at the top of the hill. It's so beautiful. "Sorry, bad dream. But come on, I'll show you the river," I said. We walked to the front of the house. She was wearing a McGill t-shirt, jeans, and these extravagant heels. The t-shirt and jeans must have been the smallest size. They hugged her body. She was incredibly sexy, and she knew it. Her outfit was too light for an October morning, but should I complain when I was only wearing boxers? I can't see anything. The windows are too high, she said. Come up here, I suggested. I took her upstairs to where the attic was built. The fourth floor was added as a false floor. It was built to make the house appear in the style of Italian architecture rather than the original Greek classical one. We equipped an apartment there and rented it out until we improved our financial affairs. In the end, our eldest son took it over. The front of the apartment had a high ceiling with a spacious sleeping loft. Now I took Avril upstairs. Her small stature was ideal for this space. These dormers look so small from the outside, but I can stand in them. And the view of the river is really spectacular, she said. Glad you like it. You have a beautiful house, larger than ours in Mont Royal, but too big for two people, even for those who decided to live separately, she said with a hint of reproach. Well, you've seen the view, I said. I'm not finished yet. We need to talk, she said, looking around at me. You are an attractive man. Men like this shouldn't sleep alone with their nightmares, she said. Circumstances turned out this way, I answered, trying to put sarcasm into my voice. What a fool you are. The most beautiful woman who loves you sleeps alone with her bad dreams in this same house, she said, going down to the living area. What do you want, Madame Dumont? I asked. I want you to stop hating my poor Philip, who can no longer defend himself. What makes you think that I hate him? Now you think I'm a fool, she said, sitting down at the table. Coffee would be nice while we speak. I have to kick her out, I thought. She's dangerous, but how absurd it is to be afraid of such a small woman. Would you like some tea? I asked. No, it's coffee this morning. We're having a serious conversation, she said. It took me a few minutes to make the coffee, and I watched her the whole time. She was confident and completely calm, sitting in a room with a barely dressed man. It was me who felt awkward and insecure. I drink it with cream and sugar, not black and bitter like the barbaric Americans, she said with a slight grin. She knew how I drank coffee. What else did she know about me? All I knew was that she was the widow of the man who seduced my wife. I put coffee with cream and sugar in front of her. Getting ready to get dressed, I moved towards the closet. Don't dress up. I'm an older woman and therefore enjoy a man's figure. Don't deprive me of that pleasure, she said. I froze, but still sat down in my boxers and started drinking coffee. You and I have a lot in common, Avril Dumont began. We are both married to people of passion, but we ourselves are rather reserved and reserved. Perhaps the biggest difference between us that I notice is that you are shy and I am not. Perhaps that is why we are so different we react, or maybe it's our genders, cultures, or all of this together. My mother was a war bride. She was Japanese and followed my French-Canadian father to Montreal after the war. I was their fourth child, last and only daughter. It wasn't easy being half Japanese after the war. It's not easy even now, but my Philip has never seen me like this. If only you could know him. What a man he was. Tall and so elegant, he towered over the crowd. But I'm not just talking about appearance. He had a gift shining around him, the light of genius. Philip was already a great artist at the age of 26. He walked around the McGill University campus like a prince. He was a part-time teacher of drawing and professor of restoration. I was a modest freshman. I worshipped him like a deity. The little dark-skinned girl is half one, half the other. It was a miracle that he noticed me at all. But when he kissed me, I felt little death. Do you know what this is? The little death that lovers experience when it seems that their breathing stops and their hearts freeze. Why we got married, I don't know. We were so incompatible, and neither family was happy with this union. Philip barely had any income. I was a stupid young girl, but so in love. We lived on his income from restoring the works of other artists because it brought in money. He should have written it himself, but I got pregnant too quickly. Everything was different then. The methods of protection were unreliable. We could have done something, but we were too Catholic to dare to do it. We were poor, we had nothing but children and love, such great love. I'll never be this happy again. But I knew it wouldn't last. Philip was too great to be contained in one life. Simone was 7 and Suzanne was only 5 when I noticed his displeasure. The sex was still amazing, but he had a desire to roam in his eyes. He had a great need, great skill, and great appetite for life. What could I do? Hold it so tightly that it stifles our love. I had to hold it with my palms open. I suggested that we see other people. I saw relief in his blue eyes. I chose men so as not to compete. Superficial guys, more physical, but less experienced. They gave me pleasure without threat. I hoped he would do the same, and he did until he met her. This was my worst fear. The woman is so perfect tall, blonde with red streaks in her hair. Her skin is said to be peaches and cream, and her eyes are large, magical brown. If she only had looks, it wouldn't be so bad. But she was much more. I think you can see it. It's obvious in her portrait. Her mischievous smile contrasts with her innocent eyes. This combination of sexuality and innocence is so attractive that no man can resist. And then she made me love her. At first it seemed that their romance was coming to an end. There was a husband and small children. She would not have left her husband, and Philip would not have asked her to do so. Their love was pure, each wanted only the best for the other. But then my husband died. Did he find out about them? Philip moved in with her. I was desperate. Now I will definitely lose my husband. I saw how bright their love burned, and there were these wonderful little boys to take care of. When I arrived for the first weekend in this terrible, uncultured Albany, a cloud of sorrow and fear hung over this beautiful house. Her husband disappeared, but she missed him and was overwhelmed by her worries. The little boys were confused, not understanding their mother's sadness. No one spoke about the missing man. We lived like in some movie where he left the frame, but everyone expected him to return for a happy ending. Or maybe it was a tragedy. Philip took on the role of faithful lover until everything became clearer. I look you in the eye when I say this. I have never been prouder to be Philippe Dumont's wife. He didn't leave his love because it was inconvenient or difficult. He loved this woman, and she needed him, and he was there. It was her husband who somehow failed. I knew then that Philip would never leave me, no matter what happened. He will always be my Philip. He was that rarest of creatures, a truly good person. They say that no Christmas can compare to what we experience as children. These people are fools. After all, it is the Christmas that we share with our true love that forever remains the most vivid memory in our soul. That year, when Karen came to Mont Royal, she stole our hearts, just as Philippe once stole hers. I never had a sister, but now I have one, and 2 little boys that I could love along with my daughters. Our house was full of joy, but underneath the joy there was sadness for a man who was somewhere far away and, perhaps, in danger, which no one spoke about. December 1990 was a snowy year in Montreal. We made snowmen for the little boys, went to a puppet show, and watched as the older boy tried to hide his tears when his father called from afar. He was told that he should be brave like his dad. Karen just whispered, "Thank God he's still alive." Your family has become part of our family. I don't regret it. It was right. Karen will always be my sister, just as Philip will always be my husband. Nothing will change that, but I hurt my sister because I am a selfish woman. I'm lost without my Philip. He's always on my mind. That day I came with her portrait to share with Karen. It was thoughtless. I should have known. Perhaps somewhere deep inside I understood this, but I came anyway. Please forgive us. We didn't mean to cause pain. I'm lost without my Philip. I need my sister. She has a piece of him, and I need that piece. Please, please, I beg you, forgive her. It wasn't sin. It was only love. Avril Dumont burst into tears. She couldn't hold back any longer. All her grief and loss overwhelmed her, and she poured it out. She bared her soul to me, leaving nothing hidden. She tore off the mask of a confident woman and revealed the vulnerable, suffering woman hidden underneath. I was right. She really is dangerous. She was truly brave and strong. She had a strength that was beyond my physical courage. She touched my heart and took away my anger. She hurt my pride by showing me her boundless love. I hugged her, let her cry on my shoulder, and stroked her head like a baby. She defeated me, and I couldn't be angry anymore. We went downstairs. I carried her in my arms. She was so small, so light, and so brave. Her head lay on my shoulder, and her tears moistened my bare chest. We found Karen in the kitchen on the first floor. She screamed when she saw us. "You scoundrel, what did you do to her?" They rushed to each other, two such different women, but connected somewhere deep in their souls. I retreated upstairs, bare-hearted and alarmed to the core. Later, Karen went upstairs. She knocked quietly on the door. "Rob, can I talk to you? Apologize," she said. When I opened the door, she rushed into my arms. "Please, please, I'm so sorry," she whispered, her tears running down my wool shirt. She tried to explain everything again, but I stopped her. "No need," I said. Avril explained everything to me. We sat on the strange half-couch our son left behind when he moved to Chicago. She clung to me, and I was silent. I had no words, and she was afraid to speak. Finally, she couldn't stand it anymore. "What will happen to us?" she asked quietly. "I don't know. I'm too confused. It seems like more than a person can bear," I said. "Can we just pretend for a little while that this didn't happen? At least until we understand if there is any way out," she said. "And how is this supposed to work, love?" She smiled. "If you still love me, we will find a way. How long will we ignore the past? I'm not asking forever, just until January. I have to help Avril. She is suffering so much, and I feel like I owe it to her. If this hurts you, I'm sorry," she said. "Yes, it hurts, but I also worry about Avril. All she did was love someone endlessly. I don't think I'm capable of what she did," I said. Karen started crying again. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. Thus began a new period in my life and marriage. Karen helped Avril organize an exhibition of Philip's work. The exhibition was to first take place in New York and then go on a national tour. This was a significant project that involved the collection of over 150 works from various owners, collectors, and museums. The opening was planned for mid-January. Karen's plan, if it could be called a plan, was to put off dealing with our problems until the start of the new year. Karen and I were planning to see a couples therapist in January. For now, we decided to ignore the problem. Pretend that, despite Avril being there to stay with us, while she and Karen worked on the project, nothing happened. It might even have worked if we had fully taken into account the influence of Avril and her family, as well as our own. By the 5th of October, Karen had taken leave from work for the rest of the year. I tried to immerse myself in my work. The new engine, completely experimental, promised the ability to launch an aircraft into orbit with 80,000 pounds of thrust. There was just one problem. It never came close to the stated figure. The government dragged me into this project. The university was delighted because the contract was huge. The work was supposedly secret, but how can you keep a project secret that thousands of engineers and scientists have already worked on? The engine itself was a monster. He wasn't handsome. This beast gulped air and burned fuel faster than any other engine. Speed ensured its efficiency, along with the lightness of its design. But he never achieved the numbers shown on paper. He had his problems, not least similar to the problems of my marriage. The engine became a wonderful distraction, but I tried not to get attached to it. Something told me that my job might be the reason I lost Karen to Philip. That's exactly how I saw it. Philip won her and loved her. Their secret life was a part of her that I will never know. Perhaps I was jealous, narcissistic, or just stupid. I felt that Philip made me second. What Karen and I had will never compare to what she had with him. Avril was right, I hated him. A man I could only know through his women. Problems began with the arrival of his daughter Simone. First she came with her children, 5 of them. The 2 eldest were her stepsons, and the 3 were her own children. Soon her husband appeared, and then her sister Suzanne with her husband and 2 children. They were all glad to see Aunt Karen. They knew her well. Then the grandmothers arrived. Amy Lefebvre, who was 81 years old, Avril's mother, and the Grande Dame Sarah Marie Pascal du Monti. She was 95 years old, but you couldn't tell. A tall, slender woman, she was the center of any room she entered. Then came two uncles who were only there for the holiday, and four cousins, all in their 20s, who were planning a trip to New York after Thanksgiving. American Thanksgiving, not ours. My oldest son showing up with a new girl who was nice enough and spoke with a Midwestern accent didn't surprise me. Oscar's appearance with his friend Mark was shocking. Now the house, which only a week ago seemed empty, was full of people. They had all come to celebrate Thanksgiving in October, a Canadian holiday, and to support Avril in what had become her life's work, getting the recognition she felt worthy of Philip. Our house turned into Avril's house. Her family simply swallowed up mine. Naively, I still believed that I was staying away and possibly heading towards loneliness and single status. The first problem was the sleeping accommodations. It was easy with kids. Several groups at the university were making bunk beds for dorms to free up space. 4 sets of beds were placed in 2 of the 3 bedrooms on the 3rd floor. Old furniture was also removed there. The uncles moved into the 3rd bedroom on the 3rd floor. The grandmothers occupied a 2-room guest suite on the 2nd floor with a small bathroom. "Great convenience," said Miss Lefebvre. Oscar, Mark, Kevin, and a girl, I think was named Laura, were in the basement, which had a gym, laundry room, extra kitchen, and hot tub. They slept together in the hall on rented cots. I asked how the girl felt about sleeping with 3 guys, but I didn't get an answer, just a shrug. The cousins took over the living rooms, sleeping on the couches. Avril's daughters and their husbands stayed on the 4th floor, leaving the back bedroom on the 2nd floor for Avril, Karen, and me. This was a circumstance that I only learned about after returning to that madhouse on Thursday evening. The sleeping places had already been allocated. This huge group of people dined on wood-fired pizza from an expensive restaurant in the south of the city. I haven't set foot in our old bedroom since Karen's painting was delivered there. I didn't think I could ever experience this room differently. The day was not going well. The monster standing in the university laboratory did not want to cooperate with me. She was a quiet lady who was not easy to tame. Her unpredictability bothered me. So much power, so little control. When I came home, which had been filled with so many people in just a few days, I felt like a stranger. They treated me with relaxed familiarity, as if I was part of this large family that now included my 2 sons and Karen. I felt more distant from Karen and the boys than ever. Were they even mine all these years, or did I share them with someone else all this time? "Where do we sleep?" I asked. We were at the back of the main kitchen, in a corner created by remodeling an old porch. I fed 3 cats. 2 were pet soft and affectionate, belonging to Karen. The 3rd one she chose became mine from the very beginning. This cat was named Aggie, after agate marble, due to her coloring. She was half the size of the others, but 10 times stronger. Not a single mouse, not a single stray bat or lost pigeon could feel safe. She knew her territory and guarded it vigilantly. Aggie was the protector any old home needed. "Please, just until next week, then the house will be empty. Everyone will be in Montreal for Christmas, and you can make up an excuse if you don't want to go," Karen said. I didn't answer. I felt like I was being pushed. "Please, it will be too difficult to explain. They don't know how things are. It's just for a few days," she said. "Okay, I guess I can sleep with my wife in less than a week," I said. Karen looked away, and something told me there was something else she wasn't saying. "Karen, what are you hiding?" "Nothing. We just don't have enough space to worry about your grievances at the moment. These people don't understand things the way you do. Please don't make a scene," she replied. Karen quickly left, and I tried to finish with the cats. I had no luck finding Avril or Karen that evening. The house was full of people, and everyone wanted to meet Aunt Karen's husband. Aren't Karen and Avril the most wonderful women? And am I not lucky? "What are you doing?" Sarah Marie demanded. Her accent was thick, and she was proud of it. Before I could answer, Madame Lefebvre intervened. "He's a mechanic, works at the university upstairs, repairs their airplane engines," she said proudly. This information was received with approval. Sarah clearly valued honest, hard workers. In her opinion, not everyone could be an artist. "You can't feed on paints and canvas," she remarked. "Are you paid enough, or are you still working part-time in the army?" Amy Lefebvre added. Her accent was light, but the R sounded a little stronger than usual. I wondered how she knew. Her information was not entirely accurate, but close enough. "Yes, they pay well, and I'm not in the reserves anymore," I said, which seemed to please them. They were two charming ladies, and I would have loved to talk to them all evening, but I needed to find Karen or Avril. When I finally freed myself, they were nowhere to be found. They disappeared somewhere. They were up to something. I was not a fool. Putting Karen in my bed had been their plan all along. It would be difficult, but I planned to resist the temptation. Later, I will understand how naive and simple-minded I was. These two women achieved their goal without difficulty. The rest of the family didn't let me get bored. I was tired after a long day of work and unaccustomed to communicating with so many people. I decided to claim the bed and let Karen find me already asleep. When I entered the bedroom, it was empty. The bed is neatly made, and my clothes and personal belongings are put in their places. Another small chest of drawers appeared, and in Karen's wardrobe I noticed Avril's things. But then this did not arouse my suspicions. I knew they were sleeping together and assumed Avril had found another place to sleep. I pulled out the only pair of pajamas I had. I definitely wasn't going to sleep in my underpants that night. When I got into bed, I immediately fell asleep. I was too tired for any games these women might have in mind. The dream began innocently. I walked up the hill towards my laboratory. For some reason, there was no one around. Usually, there is security at the school, but now there was none. My cat Aggie was sitting in the place of the engine. Then another Aggie appeared, then a third and a fourth. They lined up peacefully, but when I came closer, they turned into a huge fire-breathing cat. I woke up with horror, just at the moment when the flames were about to consume me. I found myself sandwiched between two naked women. "Bad dream again, Robert?" Avril asked. "About the plane again?" Karen added. "Why do women always have cold feet?" "No, this time it's a fire-breathing cat," I replied. I couldn't turn around or move away. The bed, designed for two, was cramped for three. The women didn't seem to mind. On the contrary, they pressed themselves even closer to me. I knew they were both in the same bed as me, but somehow it felt natural, even comforting. With Avril around, Karen will have to keep a low profile. I was able to go back to sleep, determined to get this all sorted out in the morning. When I woke up, Avril was already taking a shower. The small bathroom at the back of the bedroom we were in only had a walk-in shower. Avril came out of the bathroom completely naked, absolutely not embarrassed. Damn, she was an incredibly sexy woman. Karen was sitting on the edge of the bed, also completely naked. The women exchanged air kisses, and only then did Karen notice that I was awake. Karen leaned over to me and said, "Let's take a shower together, it'll save time." I was glad I was still wearing my pajamas as I watched Avril, still naked, calmly sit down at the dressing table and begin combing her hair. My brain seemed to shut down as my eyes took in her graceful form, her small, perfectly round breasts. She was so small, but absolutely flawless. Karen pulled me by the hand and led me into the bathroom. There she insisted on helping me take off my pajamas. I involuntarily admired her luxurious body. Tall, curvy, her drop-shaped breasts were size D, and the smooth curves of her waist and seductive hip line created an image of true femininity. Karen turned on the water and pushed me into the shower. When we finally left the bathroom, Avril had already finished getting dressed. She was wearing tight leather pants and a tiny t-shirt that showed off her petite figure. She wore deep red lipstick that matched her sly, confident smile perfectly. I wasn't a fool. I realized that this was all a deliberate move. They noticed my attraction to Avril and skillfully played on it. I was completely naked and forced to get dressed in front of two women who were clearly enjoying their advantage. They looked smug, like smart and experienced women, confident in their superiority over men. I quickly got dressed and hastily ran out of the house without even having breakfast. I was glad that I had escaped the company of the Dumontes and Lefebvres. I had work to distract myself with. When I got to the lab, I gathered everyone and explained that the engine needed to be completely rebuilt. Now, it will not be one large unit, but four small ones, connected by a common inlet and outlet. The main problem would be getting fuel evenly into all the chambers, but I was hoping I could solve that. This idea created real enthusiasm among the group. Young engineers eagerly absorbed the new concept like fresh air. It was exactly what I needed, the perfect distraction from the chaos of my personal life. I was completely immersed in my work, but by midnight I realized it was time to stop. My assistant Lisa, a young woman of about 25, could hardly suppress a yawn. "What time is it?" I asked. 11:30, she replied. Incredible. It seemed to me that it was already long after midnight. "No, it's not midnight yet, but it's almost," she said. I looked around and realized that the entire team of 16 people was still working, although they were already exhausted. If I let them, they will work all night, but that would be ineffective. "That's enough for today," I announced loudly. "We'll be back tomorrow, but not before noon." I was the last one left to close the room. The night was fresh, and the walk along the hill refreshed me. Stopping at the top, where the slope of the university turned into a steep cliff leading to the city streets and the river, I looked down. 11,000 years ago, the Hudson was a majestic river, reaching where I stood hundreds of feet above its present course. Now it has become a silver ribbon flowing south. My house, the tallest building on the street, stood out clearly against the background of the river. As I stood there, I realized that I had reached an incredible height in my career. My name will be associated with the machine that was being born behind me in the old gym. I was happier than I deserved, considering I had practically lost my home and family. I had a job I loved and young people who shared my passion. True, Persephone, as we called the engine, did not speak to me. She was indifferent, but perhaps her rebirth would change that. The yard was dark when I entered through the back gate. The ancient low-voltage lights we'd installed so long ago were still working, but they only added to the darkness above ankle level. A lone figure waited on the back porch, remaining invisible. "You're very late. Karen stopped waiting for you. She went to bed shedding tears, thinking that you wouldn't come back," Avril said from the darkness, as soon as she turned on the small lamp on the porch. "Sorry, I didn't mean to bother anyone. I just got lost in my work." Even in the dim light of the porch, I noticed the disbelief in her gaze. "What does it take for you to forgive her?" Avril demanded an answer. "That's a question I don't have an answer to, but that's not why I'm late." We were working on a new engine. Young employees are inspired. They would work all night if I allowed it. As if confirming my words, my phone rang. "Hello. Yes, Lisa. I'm home, and it's time for you to sleep. We're working tomorrow. It's a good idea, but it can wait." "Good night," I said, closing the phone. "This is my assistant," I explained. "She has an idea about using a different material for the fuel lines." Avril laughed. "Should I be jealous?" she asked. "To what, or more precisely, to whom?" "To the girl who is talking on the phone with the man I'm trying to seduce," Avril replied, standing up to enter the house. I followed her upstairs to the room I had shared for years with one woman, and now with two. Avril's remark pierced me. I thought about her actions, tried to understand them like a man, pushing away the idea that she could be flirting with me. But now she said, "I'm trying to seduce." The desk lamp illuminated the room with a warm glow as we entered. "See, I brought him." "Stop crying, my love," Avril said, cupping Karen's face in her hands. I noticed that my wife was crying, and at the same time I couldn't help but notice the new black satin peignoir she was wearing. I've never seen this before, and while I was watching, the two women kissed. This was not a friendly kiss on the cheek, it was a lover's kiss. I froze in place, or rather, not all of me. I watched as Karen undressed Avril, revealing her white lace lingerie. Then the two of them lay down on the bed. "We could use a man," my wife said, making room for me between them. I started moving towards them, thinking it might be a dream, and along the way I started taking off my clothes. "No, this is our task, just come to us. We need you," Avril said. I don't know how long it lasted. It seemed to go on forever. "Do you often do this together?" I asked, for which I received a playful slap from each of my mistresses. "You are an evil man. First you use us, and then you insult us," Avril said. "And all we wanted was to please you," Karen whispered. "It was our first time together, and we wanted him to be with you," Karen said. "Something special for our man," Avril added. Then we fell asleep, a dream of exhaustion and satisfaction. I woke up around 8:30, lying between two naked women. I wish I had stayed in bed, but someone had to be in control of what was going to happen today in the old building on campus. I would have preferred to sleep until noon, but I assumed that some of my project participants might start earlier. 10 minutes later, I took a shower and got dressed. A shower was necessary after yesterday's marathon of passion. I skipped shaving. It was Saturday, and I was going to work on the engine. When I left the bedroom, my companions from last night were still fast asleep. The rest of the house, on the other hand, was bustling. People seemed to be everywhere. "Bonjour," Madame Lefebvre greeted me. "Good morning, but why so much activity?" I asked. "You know young people, always quelques part pour erreur. Did you sleep well?" she asked with a slight smile. "Yes, but what?" "Pas de, just nothing. I didn't expect to see you so early. Mais peu importe, I le service breakfast with Sarah and Suzanne. How do you like your eggs?" "Whipped." I was seated in the dining room, or rather, Madame Dumont did it. We were left alone while she served me coffee and an omelette worthy of the finest restaurant, with a slice of ham on the plate. "This is what Madame Lefebvre calls scrambled eggs," said Sarah Dumont with a slight grin. We were alone, and she sat down opposite me. "So tell me, are you still suffering, or have your women healed their wounds?" she asked. I just looked at her through a plate of incredibly delicious food, and she smiled, saying, "Fortunately, Madame Lefebvre's hearing is no longer what it used to be. But we're talking, you know. We didn't expect to see you so early." "I have work at the university today," I answered. It seems to me that you are just running away from your problem." "Oh, do I have a problem?" "Certainly. My son stole your wife, made her his mistress, and left you a cuckold. Your pain is obvious, and I think justified. But you are a good man, reliable in your own way, and I believe that you love your wife with all your heart. However, we women have taken away your pride. It's a complex issue," she said. The omelet was delicious, and the ham had a rich flavor that you can't find in the supermarket. "My granddaughter found a good butcher yesterday. We're going to have a great turkey Monday," she added. "I think the family will survive." Yes, this is, in the end, the most important thing. We have our pains, but we find a way to continue living. Karen is a good woman. Her sin was love and need. She had already paid for it with guilt many times over. She is ready to do anything to relieve you of the pain she caused. But we both know that this is impossible. "It is you who must avoid the next sin," she said, pausing and looking intently at me with her blue eyes, which have faded with age. "And what kind of sin is this?" "Pride. You have to let her go for their sake. They need you." Don't try to look like a fool in front of me. These women are closer than sisters. They are united by absolute love for a man who is no longer there. They have suffered a huge loss, and a woman like my daughter, Avril, needs to mourn it in the arms of a man. And my wife? She needs you more than ever." "What about last night?" I asked. "More coffee?" asked Madame Lefebvre, entering the room with a coffee pot to refill our cups. She then sat down at the table next to us, smiling. "We discussed Rob's problem," Sarah Dumont said. "Isn't this a happy problem?" asked Madame Lefebvre. "He still feels pain," Sarah answered. "Ah, I'm sorry," said Madame Lefebvre, extending her hand to cover mine with hers. "But you will see they are good women and will take care of you." "But perhaps you see two women as a burden," she suggested. "I saw a program on your Southern television about a man with 4 wives. This seems like a stupid burden." Nonsense, Avril and Karen are capable women. They want a man, yes, but they will give him more than they take. He would be a fool to reject what he has, Sarah said. What do I have? I asked. They both looked at me, but Madame Lefebvre spoke first, and it was said from the bottom of her heart. You have love. Their love and our love. Now and always. The climb up the hill was steep, but enjoyable on a sunny autumn day. I agreed with Karen to delay making a resolution until the new year, but it became apparent that I would be pressured to accept the current situation as a permanent resolution. The older women were right. They tried to tell me that the past cannot be changed. Regrets are stupid when faced with today's problems. Hating a dead man is ridiculous, and the situation in which he took my wife, and now I took him, seemed strange. But I agreed more with Madame Lefebvre than with Sarah Dumont. Two women are a greater burden than one. Where have you been? I called you. Lisa greeted me when I entered. I turned off the phone. What about not before noon? Didn't you understand? I answered. Lisa just shook her head. Behind her, there was a line of people wanting to talk to me. Everyone was there, except for the three true geniuses, who did not appear until they had solved their problems. If they were missing for more than 2 days, I would have to look for them to make sure they weren't sick due to new problems. They weren't the easiest team to manage, but at the end of the day, every team has its challenges. You push them from behind, step forward when necessary, and step back when someone else takes the lead. You control as much as you can. The university president called at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. The news has leaked. We discussed the details. This project was designed for 1 year. Good funding for a relatively well-defined job that provided a few jobs and generated a small amount of income. Now everything has changed. The government will be pleased, but demanding. Our department will gain recognition, but the university will have to defend its rights before the vultures appear. I understood the president's concerns. She needed to snatch as much as possible while we were still in control of the situation. How unique is this for us? She asked. Everything except the concept itself. One of the advantages of our team is that they are smart and independent. As we speak, they are already recreating it from scratch, I replied. Persephone. The engine is our engine, I said, knowing she was shaking her head at the weirdos who run the university. Keep me posted, and I will keep you posted, she said. Lunch appeared from the university cafeteria shortly after my conversation with the president, and the team began taking orders for dinner. What's happening? Asked several of my employees. You have become important. Enjoy it while it lasts. We worked until 9 in the evening, after which I sent everyone home until 6 on Monday morning. We now had armed guards to keep order, thanks to the administration, which also began erecting barriers around the site. The last thing I did before leaving was remind Lisa that someone would need to check on the geniuses on Sunday night to make sure they were okay. Leave the phone on, she shouted after me. When I entered the house, Karen was already waiting for me. Have you had dinner? She asked. Yes, we ordered something, I answered without going into details. I realized that I had not told my wife anything about the most important event in my professional life. Are you avoiding us? She asked. We were in the kitchen at the back of the house. I could hear the guests ahead. It's an old house and sound travels in a strange way. You could hear a big happy family enjoying time together, but it was impossible to make out what they were saying. I was working, I answered. Late at night on the weekend? Yes. She started crying. What do I need to do to make you forgive me? Don't all our years together mean anything? I wanted to hug her, tell her everything would be okay, but that would be a lie because I didn't really know where we were going. Everything has changed so much in a short time. We stood on the threshold of a new, different life. To move on, I had to adapt to a new way of life and accept that everything that was before was not what it seemed. Karen turned around and left me standing alone in the kitchen. I felt the weight of fatigue and the realization that I was in a deep, dark, and dangerous ravine, both in my personal life and in my work. At that moment, Aggie walked into the kitchen, followed by Karen's 2 cats. She looked at me proudly, holding a large field mouse in her teeth, which was still resisting. I knew Aggie loved to play catch and release. Usually the mouse gets several chances before dying, but not this time. With one quick movement of her head, she interrupted the mouse's struggle and laid the prey at my feet, as if to say, "I am your cat, and this is your home. Here's my booty." The other two cats walked over, sniffed the dead mouse, and then followed Aggie out of the kitchen. The older cat showed who is in charge here. And she was right, my Aggie. She kept the house mouse free for me. This was my home, and she was my cat. I headed to the front of the house. Everyone gathered in the large living room. The conversation stopped when I entered. Karen, Avril upstairs. "We're going to bed," I said, and, without waiting for an answer, headed up the stairs. They followed me. They had no other choice. The past is gone. It could not be returned, nor could it be changed. That's life. And as Aggie has demonstrated, she is cruel. The following week, just before Christmas, the fleet appeared. On a colder morning than usual for December days in upstate New York, Admiral Dan Kiwi Dickerson arrived accompanied by two lesser officers. The last time I saw Dan was when he was a lieutenant commander on the U.S. Ike. It was the spring of 1992, and the ship was heading to Norfolk for maintenance. The Gulf War, my war, is over. Dan was a deck officer, not a pilot. His very prominent nose earned him the nickname after the wingless, long-billed bird. He was not the most respected officer on Ike, but he was the good-natured fellow whom everyone loved and whose shortcomings everyone forgave. "Let me introduce you," Admiral Dickerson began, still as friendly as ever. "Rob, meet Commander Jack Marlowe and Lieutenant Allison Patrick," he said, pointing to the officers who were accompanying him. Commander Marlowe was a tall, thin black man, and Lieutenant Patrick was a petite blonde. She was impeccably put together, and their uniform was the only thing that reminded them of military service. If these two were once military men, now, like me, they had long been civilians. The blonde looked around with quick but purposeful movements, her cold smile betraying a professional sense of observation more suited to a security officer. The man looked reserved and spoke calmly, like a person in a profession related to analysis. "Long time no see, Dan. I see you've settled in well. Let's go say hello to Persephone," I said, leading them to the center of the old building where the engine was being assembled with love and care. "On what scale are you building this prototype?" asked the little blonde lieutenant. "Persephone is built life-size." "She's small but mighty," I replied. We approached the engine. It was only partially assembled, as parts were made in factories throughout the northeastern United States. Very precise puzzle pieces that we put together into Persephone version 2.0. But her outer shell was ready a body awaiting its heart and lungs. "How much traction?" Dan asked. "We are counting on at least 120,000 pounds, I replied. "But what do you really expect?" he clarified. "More, much more," Eddie Davis, one of the graduate students working on the engine, chimed in. He was just tightening the outer bolts of the engine housing and heard the Admiral's comment. Each component was created and installed with the precision required by my meticulous assistants. I could consider myself the creator of this idea, but they were the ones who gave it life. "Your people are a little sensitive," Marlowe noted professionally. Of course, I thought. Psychiatrist. The Admiral, the agent, and the psychiatrist came to the meeting, but what is the true purpose of their visit? This engine was supposed to consume a lot of fuel. "Is this the problem you were trying to solve?" asked the imaginary lieutenant. "Well, that's exactly what the new design solves, and also eliminates the need to force air through the engine," Liz chimed in, walking towards us. "Do you mind if we take a look around and ask a few questions?" Dan asked. "No, you will pay, but I need to get back to work. Liz will show you everything," I said. "Only one condition. Let me treat you and your ladies to dinner tonight for old time's sake," Dan suggested. At that moment, I realized for whom this bell was ringing, and I was sure that it was for me. He said "damn" in the plural, not "lady." The fleet came for its trophy, but without me. We ended up at my house. Karen had already started cooking her signature roast when I called. 3 extra guests were not a problem. It so happened that what I now called the team of liquidators arrived at my house. We had dinner in the formal dining room. My ladies, as Dan called them, happily put on a show. They apparently thought that this was helping me in my work. The two fake officers easily entered into a conversation with Karen and Avril. They clearly passed Karen's sniff test, but not Avril, who seemed to have a keener nose for lies. She provoked them a little, especially the fake lieutenant. However, everything was going well until we got to dessert. Karen made a rum cake made from scratch. The extra alcohol was completely unnecessary. Avril stocked the bar for the guests and, in good French style, bought expensive wine for dinner. Admiral Dan started by enjoying some Johnny Walker Black before moving on to Burgundy. By dessert, the Admiral was already quite drunk and was telling everyone war stories. If he had limited himself to his pompous stories, perhaps everything would have gone smoothly. But, as it turned out, my stories were much more interesting. So, the chief engineer is lying under the A-1, this is a subsonic bomber, and Iceman, that is, Rob is here, checking the engine mounts, when suddenly bang, the landing gear folds. I swear to God, half the people on the flight deck wet themselves from fear. But not Iceman. The plane almost hit him, but he simply moved on to the next plane. What happened to the chief engineer? Avril asked. He died while Rob was holding his hand. A terrible sight. I watched as the blood drained from Avril's face and Karen's expression turned stony. Perhaps this is not the most appropriate topic for conversation over dessert, the commander suggested. I find our master's exploits very interesting, said the lieutenant. It's hardly heroic when you're just trying to survive, I said. Oh, come on, Robbie. Billy Pascal, who works at the Pentagon, goes to the bar every payday and tells everyone about the flight he took with you over the Gulf. They're at 30,000 feet at Mach 1 when the engine fails. Billy tries to restart it. Nothing. Once again, nothing. It's time to eject, he says. But the poor guy is piloting a plane with Iceman on board. Try again, comes from the second chair. Nothing. Now try without fuel. Well, by this point Billy has already wet himself and thinks it's too late. But he does as he is told. He starts the engine without fuel. So what do you think? The engine starts. Billy swears they almost hit a wave as they climbed back up. Bad fuel, you see. The reserve tanks were not damaged. Having finished his story, Dan leaned back in his chair, obviously feeling that he had proved some point that had eluded me. The lieutenant ran her finger along the rim of her wine glass. It's funny how a person behaves in a crisis situation. Some men, when pressure is put on them, they just blossom, she said, looking at me intently. And many men die in war without any purpose because accidents happen and bullets fly. Women lose their husbands and children lose their fathers, Avril said, her voice full of anger. I realized that some of this anger was directed at me, but the commander tried to soften the situation. Risks are inevitable if we want to live a full life. Each activity is associated with a certain amount of risk. The lieutenant immediately picked up the topic. That's exactly what I was thinking about this afternoon. A small engine, completely untested, and it produces over 100,000 pounds of thrust. What happens, Professor, if something goes wrong? Why should something go wrong? I retorted too sharply. You expect the engine you named after the Queen of Hell to work the first time, said the lieutenant. I looked at Avril and Karen, who were staring at me. I never thought that she could let me down, I said to these two women who, as I realized at that moment, loved me, and whom I loved. She won't let you down. We won't let her. But she can, and if this happens, said the commander. That's an excellent question, Doctor. I'm sorry, but in uniform you look as unnatural as Miss Patrick, Avril said. Let's just say they won't have to demolish that sports complex for the new stadium they're planning to build, Dan said, as if he had sobered up, interjecting himself into the conversation. You've always been a risk-taker, Rob, and that's your main problem, Dan said. So I'm a risk. Is this the official position? One of them. There are other reasons. Security and identity issues, Patrick said. Am I a security risk? Avril asked. One of them. You are a foreign citizen and a communist, but Karen's past connections are no less troubling, and also an unstable group of eccentrics working on the engine. The main assistant is a gay girl who has never been in a relationship for more than a week. The rest of the employees seem to be social deviants. I think you're going overboard, Special Agent, Dr. Marlowe intervened. I admit, the engine development team was indeed chosen for their social awkwardness, but they are not deviants. Although I admire your ability to manage such a group, sir. Oh, Rob can do that. They will follow him anywhere. 4 died, but they still answered his call in the Gulf. But there is something special about people who take risks. Of course, luck helps too, like Rob, Dan said. You have to make luck, I said. Are you going to tell us this superstitious nonsense about how engines speak? Dan asked. Why should I do this? Obviously, you are already planning to move the project to another location. May I ask where? It's a secret, Agent Patrick said. Sorry, but there's too much at stake, Dan replied. I would protest against the injustice of stealing someone else's work, but I'm glad that this devilish creature is leaving, Avril said. These words actually ended the conversation, but not the project. The weirdos never accepted the fact that they had been replaced. They continued working on their own. Persephone still had her own priests and priestesses. They put it together slowly, but slow and steady often wins the race. It was late on Christmas Eve, or rather early Christmas morning. The house at Mount Royal was asleep. It was a big old building, not as big as our house on the Hudson, but still spacious. It had 3 floors full of relatives. I slept with Karen and Avril again out of necessity, but the coldness, especially from Avril after dinner with the Admiral, remained in force. My extended family was aware of the problem, but did not understand the cause. The only thing that broke the Cold War that women were waging against me was when my son Oscar sat me down and told me he was marrying his longtime partner, Mark. Karen and Avril sat next to me, holding my hands. This turned out to be much less of a shock than they expected. Moreover, I didn't have much of a say in the matter other than to wonder if my son's cold relationship with me was related to his sexual orientation. It seemed unfair, as if he had judged me in advance. It ended with me hugging them both. Oscar's recognition brought a brief lull in our Cold War. This was especially frustrating because I understood the problem, but there seemed to be nothing I could do about it. Dealing with one woman has always been difficult for me. And when there are 2 people against you, there is no point in fighting, especially since I agreed with them. Persephone was forbidden love. She could have taken me away from my family. I was a late middle-aged man attracted to a dangerous young lover. My women despised her and were angry at my attraction to her. Karen and Avril were afraid that my new love might destroy me and were desperate to get me to give her up. Our Canadian Christmas Eve was a success. The day and time spent with my family brought me pleasure. I was calm as I sat by the cooling coals of the fireplace in the small visitors' lounge. I was at the front of the house, looking out onto the streets of Montreal. Light snow began to fall. I saw a figure reflected in the window glass. Just a blurry silhouette, but I recognized her and loved her. She paused in the doorway for a minute and then came and settled on my lap. I was amazed again at how small Avril was and how her body blended perfectly with mine. I tried, but I can't help myself, she began, then looked into my eyes. Her face in the light of the dying fire was beautiful. I love you, she said. It's stupid because as a man you inevitably cause women pain. Why do you believe the boasts of a man who lives in a fictional past, far from reality? The time I went through was pure hell. Yes, the fire burned hot, but I survived. Those flames are yesterday's conflicts. Sometimes they still haunt my dreams, but not when I feel your loving embrace. It was you and Karen who constantly begged to leave the past behind. So let's let the past rest in peace. The dead will not rise. Spilled blood cannot be put back together. The follies of youth must be redeemed by the wisdom of maturity. I'm finally at peace, why can't you? But the new engine is dangerous. You hid it from us and named it after the devil. You will choose her instead of us, she said. It's just drawings on an easel, parts waiting to be assembled. When she is ready, others will love her. Young souls ready to risk everything and dance their dance with death. I'm too old, and everyone seems to understand that except you and Karen. Do you promise? Karen asked, hugging my neck and pressing her cheek to mine. I didn't hear her enter the room. Avril turned and kissed my wife on the lips, then did the same to me. Is everything okay now? Asked Karen. It was obvious she was talking to Avril, who nodded and snuggled into my arms. He promised. He's a man of his word, Avril said with hope in her voice. With these words, I left Persephone behind. Karen came and sat on the floor, leaning against us. So the three of us sat, watching Christmas snow cover the streets of Montreal. I realized that this was a new and eternal love. Representatives of the artistic elite gathered in the main hall of the exhibition gallery. Philippe Dumont's exhibition entitled Regeneration and Innovation has opened. I had no idea that this man had such a large legacy of work. The exhibition was prepared with love and skill by his wife and his mistress. Avril and Karen have been working around the clock for the past week to get everything organized. Every day seemed to bring them new problems. Now their efforts have paid off with the approval of the assembled cultural figures. I looked at this with a feeling of mixed jealousy and admiration for my late rival. But I couldn't help but recognize his talent and work. Most of the work was modern and abstract, but one classic painting stood out among them. Portrait of his mistress in nude beauty. It graced the cover of the museum catalog and occupied a central place in the exhibition. It was my wife, but undoubtedly his beloved. I accompanied my women to evening festivities, listened to speeches, applause, and watched as my women received standing ovations. I heard them lovingly telling the audience their memories of Philip. It was a difficult night for me, especially when Karen was performing. The two women stopped at Karen's painting at the back of the crowd. They say she was married even then, said one. Perhaps she had a very understanding husband, answered her companion. Very understanding, Karen whispered in my ear, taking my arm. Avril came over and took my other arm. It's time to take you to bed. It was a busy day, she said. Fine, and you'll both pay for the evening, I replied. The sun has risen, the first stage is completed. The alkaline plains of the Black Rock Desert began to reflect the heat. The service team fussed around the short, thick machine. Persephone V didn't look like your average land speed record contender, but on her first run of the morning, she easily broke the existing record and passed the incredible 1,000 miles per hour mark. I hope these weirdos know what they're doing, said Foreman Al Sporin. He was a 25-year veteran of the United States Air Force. Test pilot Phil Hart brought him here, as he himself put it, for company. Sporin had little to do. The car, or rather the engine, had dedicated technicians who took care of its every need. Judging by what she did this morning, they understand something, Hart replied. But the government didn't succeed with that engine, Sporin said in his deep, even voice, not mentioning the 3 men and 1 woman who died before Pentagon officials decided the cost was too high. Persephone's supporters took her designs and a new set of specifications, moved them to an abandoned warehouse in Buffalo, New York, and 2 years later Persephone V was released. She was taken to the high plains of Nevada and began to be tested. Phil Hart was in the twilight of his career and hoped to end it with a record that would stand the test of time. Persephone promised to send him with resounding success in one direction or another. It's just that noise on the first run that bothers me, Hart said. Noise? Asked Sporin. Something like a whisper, like she's talking, Hart replied. Sporinus just shook his head. Nobody called this car it. Persephone was definitely a she, and when she came to life, she was fast, smooth, and powerful, like the fire of hell itself. It's very likely that she could have taken you there. Persephone was ready. Hart walked to the car and buckled up, after which the man and car were towed to the start of the track for the return run across the salt flats. The second race was necessary to confirm the record. The sun was already high when Hart made his final checks and began the countdown. Persephone came to life. Breaking the sound barrier, she easily exceeded the 1,000 miles per hour mark. That's when heart hurt her. Faster, 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 she whispered, like a passionate lover giving herself to the man inside her. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think. Click to the next one. 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 Click to the next one.